school board elections were.
Oh, I think like in 2 years.
Yeah,
They're like about here from
Next November.
right. They're the same as the city elections.
Yes.
Right.
It used to be in September, but they combined
All to one.
city school election.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, she was at home with her family.
I was actually camping.
Oh, you were camping, okay.
So she wasn't even at
That's
home.
right, yeah.
You really bothered
I
her.
called the here and answered the phone. You know, this strange man calling my wife.
My
Yeah.
grandson in California, he's in kindergarten, now has written 2 letters with prompting from his mother, I'm sure, to the governor asking him to open schools, because he's doing online school,
Oh,
and it's just not the same.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, reminds me, I'm the very.
Good morning. No, it's a new briefcase.
Okay. You put it in your pocket?
All right, we've got everybody here.
Yep.
All right, good morning. I'm Darren Hamilton, Chairman of the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business that we have is to acknowledge the minutes from the previous meeting. All right, I have a motion from Sandquist, a second from Dimmitt to approve the previous meeting's minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Getting a lot more people coming in. So. All right, the next order of business is going to be meet with our county engineer. Scott, how are you today?
Good, put that on later.
Yeah. It didn't work.
There's another. Sit there. Sorry.
Okay, 6 feet.
There you go.
What if you're not, you only 4'2"?
Well, that sounds like your problem. All right, let's go ahead and meet with Scott Klein.
Yeah, so we've done blading of gravel and dirt roads. When they were spraying Brookville with calcium chloride, they repaired some potholes just before that and repaired the surface and sprayed it. And then Walton Road, they sprayed as well. Then our new loader has arrived.
Good.
Probably be a couple more weeks before we get a bill for it, and then a couple weeks later we'll be paying them. So, let's see. I've been continuing to do mowing mostly on the gravel road shoulders. Done some concrete patching, Libertyville Road. Potholes, done some total patching with our total patcher to fix potholes as well. And then rock hauling to spots and sign repair. I mean, I know there's one sign I called in because it was laying flat on the road. Didn't even know what sign it was because it was face down. So that's what we've been busy doing. And I have a whole bunch of utility permits. Yeah,
Okay.
I can design later.
Yep.
Oh, and then the salt shed, they've done the walls and the floor. They just need to extend the roof over that part of it. And then we'll have double the salt capacity. Save quite a bit of money by doing it ourselves and using materials, a lot of materials that we already had on hand that are new.
Mhm.
So I think that's pretty much it.
All right. I want to say thank you to Billy Groves for having somebody go out and blade some mud and rock off of Vetch Boulevard for us the other day. I really appreciated his help with that because it was not a very good situation. There was some pretty big chunks out there, and so it was a road hazard. And he was able to get somebody out there to do that before they were done for the work day on Thursday of last week. And again, I appreciate Billy doing that at my request. So
Yeah, you helped out and get the mud off.
yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't have taken very long, but it was just the fact that it was late in the day and somebody went out and did it, and I really appreciate that they did.
Yeah.
So, all right. Is there anything else for Scott? Do you have any other questions when it comes to that?
We had started, I know he has to. So safe and dry.
Yeah.
Couldn't really do anything, and then it took a while to get the road conditions. It was always. We can tell them to go fish.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. We're going to discuss and consider 2080 agreement with Jefferson County and the city of Fairfield pertaining to the West Crow Creek Bridge and Business 34 transfer of jurisdiction to Fairfield. We have a resolution that's in front of us as part of this, and the resolution reads, a resolution approving the 2080 agreement between the city of Fairfield and the county of Jefferson, Iowa, transferring jurisdiction of the West Crow Creek Bridge and an additional 290 feet length of Business 34 Burlington Avenue from Jefferson County Secondary Road System to the City of Fairfield Street System. Whereas the Iowa Department of Transportation agrees 2005-TJ-007 and 2005-TJ-006 state that the future ownership and reconstruction of the West Crow Creek Bridge will be the subject of a subsequent 2080 agreement between Jefferson County and the city of Fairfield, whereas the city of Fairfield, the Fairfield City Council approved the proposed 2080 agreement and forwarded it to the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for consideration. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors approves said 2080 agreement and authorize execution of the 2080 agreement document. We have a copy of that document with us here that was approved by the city of Fairfield at their meeting a week ago tonight. And I don't know, have you both had a chance to read it and review it a little bit?
That might help understand,
Here.
help you understand where the agreement talks about what it is.
Okay.
So right now, according to transfer of jurisdictions for the city and for the county, the jurisdiction is at the jurisdiction line is at the west end of the West Crow Creek Bridge, and it would move to a point that's 290 feet easterly of the east end of that bridge. Of course, scale of that bridge. I mean, this is Fairfield, Iowa map that's filed with Iowa Department of Transportation. There's lots of things on the map that need to be updated, but this is the map that was used in the transfer of jurisdiction, so I just went ahead and used it for this. I mean, for your display.
Right. So do any of us as members of the board have anything that we see that doesn't meet what we were expecting at this point in time with just the transfer of the ownership of the bridge and the ground enough that when the bridge is reconstructed at a longer and higher location than what it is right now? Do we want to go ahead and agree with it?
And I don't have any problem other than I just want to verify on all of this, the attorneys, area, or Scott, that the transfer of the 150,000, there are no additional funds expected to come from the county.
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve the resolution as presented and accept the 2080 agreement.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Dimmitt to approve the resolution and accept the 2080 agreement transferring jurisdiction of the West Crow Creek Bridge to the city of Fairfield. And also a second from Sandquist. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. So,
Yeah, so we signed the resolution today, but, I don't know how, Darren get and Scott Reniker will arrange with city council to sign the same, several copies maybe of the same agreement. 2080 agreement that you have. I mean, I would think we need probably at least 4 sets.
original signature sets.
Yeah.
And Aaron, since you're here, you and I can work out a time that we can do that. Right. Well, you can give me a call when the mayor is around, and then I can stop by the office at that point, or I can contact her. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Did the city have a resolution that applies to with it? Because it talks about it in the 2080 agreement.
Yeah, that was what Darren read. We gotta get that signed too.
Well, the one he read was the one that.
Yeah, the resolution I read was for the,
Yes.
yeah, for our
Well,
board.
there was a resolution with it.
Thank you, Scott. And
Yes. Yes, I'm glad to see that we've got the transfer taken care of and that we can get moving forward with this so that the city can apply for those bridge funds. Hopefully they'll get the 100% that they were talking about, and then we can move ahead with the transfer of the money that was involved in the agreement as well. So okay.
What needs to be recorded and filed with the Secretary of State? And then one's gonna be needed to send off to the DOT. Send them a copy of both resolutions and then the agreement itself. Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds reasonable.
And then, and I'm not absolutely sure who gets that. From the dude gets those documents, accepts them for the DOT on their behalf. I mean, it might be.
I would think it's probably local systems, or through the local systems office first, wouldn't it?
Not sure.
Because you're transferring something from a local entity to another local entity, and both of those would fall under the local Electrical Systems Department up in Ames. That would be my assumption at this point, but we can contact somebody at the district office out here and they can tell us what process that we can go through. So that should be fairly simple.
Yeah, and one other thing is to submit it to the people that do the mapping for the, they do for the county. Every year they ask for an annual update of the changes that have been made to the road system, and they want copies of official documentation of how that happened. Like if you vacate a road, we need to send in all of the road vacation documents before they'll change it.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for that. Let's move ahead to discuss and consider a disposal system contractor's license for Myers Excavation LLC. No, I didn't receive anything from Dan, and with that, I assume that Dan doesn't have a problem with it. So I would take a motion to do that contractor's license for Myers Excavation LLC. Okay, I have a motion from Sandquist, a second from Dimmitt. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. We have on our agenda next discussion of a meeting that I held with one of the members of the Amish community out there, myself and Chauncey Holding, our county attorney, went out on Friday to speak with Bishop Mast. He was not at home, but we're waiting on a call from him so that we can go back out and speak to him. There is one person that came in and wants to speak to this. I'm not sure whether he's out in his vehicle making phone calls or out in the lobby, but I would like to take a minute to try to get him in here to discuss with him what's going on. His name was Griner, I believe. I have no idea which vehicle he's in, but he knew to come back in. I just, yeah, let's go ahead and take a look for him. We'll take just a moment to recess here to make sure that we get him in and involve him in the discussion.
So we need to do that. Well, yeah, I think we need to get an emergency management bring them up to speed on the thought process is, in terms of, so that they're not blindsided by it. Well,
Larry needs she can talk about it a little bit, but yeah, I can certainly go to the next one here.
Well, let me start. All the process, I don't know if you want to wait until after the election. That would be up for everybody. But I still think that it's good to have it beforehand, so that it's on the table, so that when you guys go into the negotiation on the 28th of November.
Thanks for clarifying.
All right, we'll call this meeting back to order. We're going to discuss a meeting that I had with Sano Bender out there on the roadway. Mr. Bender has a tractor that has some steel rebar welded to it as well as steel wheels. He and I had a very good discussion. His suggestions were, one, he could make a lane to go from his drive, from his home to the south, down to the drive to the field that he is using most often, and would try to stay off the road as much as he could. Yeah, I'm fine. Why?
We were breathing awful heavy.
Well, I've been running up and down stairs, so I'm okay. No, thank you for asking, Lee. But I don't know. Anyway, Mr. Bender also said that it would be easy for him to find perpendicular ways to cross the roadway rather than driving north and south on the roadway out there, and he didn't seem to have any problems with doing that. I think that's a really good solution for all of us in this case. Mr. Bender had some questions about 80,000-pound vehicles that deliver scrap and cars and stuff to a couple of recyclers in the area out there, and what kind of effect those vehicles have on the roadway. I explained to him how several axles work in distributing that 80,000 pounds throughout the entire load of the vehicle, and how the drive wheels, which apply the torque in order to be able to move the vehicle down the roadway, is different from what a single axle vehicle would be with the torque from the drive wheels. And he understood that very, very clearly. And again, that's when we started talking about alternatives. Mr. Molding and I, the county attorney, went out to try to speak with Manfrotto Mast, who's the bishop of their group out there. We left a business card of Mr. Molding's with one of his daughters, I'm assuming, at the home there, and she was going to give it to her. One other reason why we stopped there is because we had previously sent a letter out and we had not received a response. And we had been told that there was a response that was sent to us. We're just trying to figure out where it went to or what would have happened to it. But I believe that that's going to be a very good discussion that we have with him. We're not trying to change what they do with their work or what type of equipment they're allowed to use or not allowed to use. We want to be able to do this on as friendly of a position as we possibly can, because we don't want any adversarial conditions going on out there. I believe that by having these discussions, we can start moving in that direction. So I know, Mr. Griner, you came here to speak to this as well.
Yeah. I live first house south of Four Corners, where the used to have it there.
Yes.
So I have neighbors with him. There's one chunk of land. So I've been there since 1999, 2000. We're talking about just him right now, but there's an entire community from there all the way to Brighton.
Yes. Yes.
So in the 20 years I've been there, I've witnessed multiple times when the tractors and the machinery, they have, one of them has a particular hay rack that's got the rim,
Right.
center tire, and
Right.
they used it with a team of horses to take a load of metal up the scrap yard. Pretty significant lines. In the old time, I had talked to Lee, a year ago, about my concern, knowing that we were going to get a new road,
Yes.
knowing that this was going to happen and be an issue. The particular tractor he has, if you go out there, I mean, you can see every clean mark on his tractor. This isn't even a hot day.
Right. Right.
So I'm not radical about this, or upset. I just knew it was coming.
Mhm.
If you want to study even where their horses' hooves are running, especially coming down that hill towards the creek.
Right.
The horses are putting a little of this down there. You're going to see heavy pitting and stuff off that. So it's probably just damage that's going to have to happen. Now, my feeling, I stopped to talk to him before I come to this meeting because I don't like talking about someone without first looking in the eye. So I went and talked to him about this issue and told him I'd be here at this meeting. wrong. I told him, I said, you know as well as me, there's no reason that you don't have a trail up to your house, you know, coming through your own farm on this. I pushed him on that issue. I said, the bare fact as a neighbor, that you didn't do that first, and you could care less about our new road that we've waited years to get. You watch those grooves, cut the grooves, know they're there. I said, it offends me that you don't care enough. So I said, that's why I'm going to go to this meeting, and I'm going to push that you guys don't get to drive your stuff on our roads. If you had a choice, and you knew what you did. I had issues with him as far as being disregarding his south fence line. He had feeder cattle, several, let's just say 100, a large amount of feeder cattle on an electric wire that got out, I'll say at least 6 times. There were 3 accidents. Everett Lacey hit one. The Nelson guy hit and killed a couple and totaled his truck, and they're paying off these people. I don't know if there's laws, you know. And I finally went down to it and I said, look, my wife and kids are on this road. This is a different topic, but this also ties in with disregard. I said, you don't put feeder cattle. I raised livestock the whole life. You don't have feeder cattle on a single electric fence. They spook. They want to stop at the fence and 5 more push them over. So we'll get off that topic, but those are examples of things that happen. You know, I've had my lawn and garden trampled by horses that were behind one wire, you know, to get out. So that's ongoing. I've always felt, you know, we don't run dozers or anything across the road without laying tires down.
Right.
I understand excessively. There's no reason, these guys were loading those pumpkins that they hauled on a rubber tired trailer to have one of us truck them to the place for them. So this is going to happen a lot of times, not just this neighbor.
Right.
There's no reason that they couldn't take a tire, cut it, turn it inside out, make 2 clamps and clamp it over these vehicles that got to go down the road. So, I mean, as far as infringing on their religion, it doesn't give them a right to damage our property. And when they get a new tractor or something, they'll run rubber tires for like, they got 90 or 120 days switched over. They feel free about doing that. So, as far as just yielding to this because of their religion, I'm not settled with that at all. I just think if you're going to run steel, we should at least say no ribs and no cleats. You have smooth ones on your wagon. That doesn't take care of the tractors.
No.
So anytime they got to go a distance, they hire us English. I don't do it, but a lot of the neighbors will pull stuff to the sale barn and stuff for them. So they can't take their steel wheels very far, so they stay close to home, and that's how they get away with the damage. So we're going to have a lot of damage in these areas close as they go to farm to farm. They've chose to buy these farms on our highways. They know this issue's here, and they still buy it. So, I mean, that's an option too. Quit buying farms that are sitting on the paint trucks because they know it's an issue and stuff like that. So I would like to see a meeting, and I'm going to have one regardless of what happens with the elders too, because I talked to the elders about this a couple of years ago on some topics. They need to wrap those tires or have a specific tractor that they use to move their stuff from farm to farm. They can share that machine.
And those are the
eliminate the damage and still allow them to be on the roads.
Those are the types of discussions I think Chauncey and I were wanting to have with Bishop Mast out there and some of the other elders. My attempt with Samuel was to go out and explain just what you were talking about, damage is done from the horses' hooves and regular wagon wheels as far as their buggies are concerned. Because a lot of Amish live around also in Van Buren County. And you can see the effects of those and their horses when they're pulling just their carriages is not as severe as bigger horses that are pulling heavier pieces of equipment or a tractor driving down the roadway. And Samuel has a very concentrated area there that's about 750 to 1,000 feet long from his driveway to the next driveway to the south. And he and I were discussing if he was to put in that frontage road, he could go at a perpendicular angle across, which means that we have a less distance that we have to worry about being damaged when it comes to moving equipment from one side of the road to the other. And to me, he seemed very amicable to doing something like that. But again, we need to discuss the bigger picture like you're talking about with not only that road, but going from there up to the Salina Road, across on Salina Road, north up the Germanville Road farther. So we want to take that up, like you said, with the elders of the church and the community as a whole, so that we can talk to them kind of one-on-one and not try to be, you know, by golly, you're going to do something or that kind of attitude with them, because I think we're going to get a lot farther with them in these types of discussions rather than trying to mandate something. I know how Lee hates getting mandates from the state on stuff that we do. And it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths when you're trying to demand them to do something. And I think that this is the most opportune time because we did get the brand new roadway out there, and it had been so many years since that road had some maintenance to it.
We tried to. We paved it. We've been working on this for a few months,
Yeah.
years actually.
You know, this is why I asked Lee to do it. I've got a little thing with you that I'll pick up personal on that issue. But I knew today was coming.
Right.
And
Because I've seen what goes on the old road, and I know the Amish, and I'm a farmer too, so I have tractors and all this, so I know the weights of it.
And some of the things that we have done, I called, because I kept having people tell me, well, so-and-so county assesses them, or they pay the county so much money for repair, and I called all the different supervisors around, and they don't, it's voluntary. Down in, I think it's Davis County, they have two groups. One of them will pay the road damage because they want to, and the other one doesn't, and because that's voluntary, we can't mandate that. I think the best strategy is to meet with them, and we tried that right before COVID because I tracked down who that this other mask was, who to send a letter to. So we've each done different pieces of this. So now Darren, as chair, has been able to go out there and have an initial conversation. We obtained a study that was done that shows the damage of the horseshoes and the buggy wheels. It was done out in Ohio because they have a lot of Amish there. And so I gave it to one of the welders that does a lot of the wheels and followed up with him, and he was quite interested in that. And he said, yeah, really, those horseshoes are what does a lot of damage because you have 2,000 pounds coming down there. So there's multiple issues, and so the best solution is for us to be able to sit down and Darren start, with one-on-one, but if we can sit down and say, hey, what can we do? Because it sounds like there can be some potential solutions available.
Right.
For multiple reasons in COVID, it got delayed.
Well, I'm gonna step in. And I think I know what you're upset about, and so I want to clarify that as well. I have been, is Pat on?
Yeah, Pat is on with us.
Pat can verify. I've argued with Pat for more than a year, long before we even paved that road, that this was going to happen. And I'm constantly being told that the courts have already ruled. The courts have already ruled. I just had a conversation with Chauncey, that's our county attorney. My argument was, and I said this to Darren on Friday, we shouldn't have to subsidize their religion as taxpayers, and that's what we're doing. And I'm vehemently opposed to it, and I don't give a flying, and you can record this, I don't give a flying rat's ass what the state says, what the state courts have said. You can't run studded snow tires on dry paper because it's against the law. But yet they can run modified steel wheels by welding rebar, and we have to live with that. We just spent, what, $500,000 on that road? You did, because it was your money. Close to $600,000. And we got a guy out here that doesn't give two hoots and a holler, running up and down the road, and these are intelligent people You can't tell me that they didn't know or that he didn't know what the damage was going to be. And I think intent needs to play into this as well. I'm okay with you know, the negotiations, what you just said. It's all voluntary.
Yeah.
And so I don't like the notion that you're talking about state mandates. I see this as a state mandate. I don't like the notion that we can't protect our road service. Anybody else would go out there and do that that's not Amish. And we have a mechanism in place that we could put a stop to it. But because they're Amish, we can't put a stop to it. That's problematic, at least in my book. I appreciate the conversation that Darren had, the idea of going across the road when it tears up a certain section of it. I know that our shoulders, especially in that area, are not wide enough to accommodate them like they are in other locations. What you said is exactly right. They have no problem using other people's rubber wheels. My argument is load the damn tractor up on a trailer and have your neighbor pull it to the next field if that's the only option you've got if you want to use metal wheels. I think that you just said that you've got neighbors that help them, you know, with, you know, pumpkins and other things. They ride in rubber tired vehicles all the time when they come in to different areas to do work. I think that it's convenient one time and convenient the next time. So it depends on it's a matter of convenience. Do I need to have somebody with the rubber wheels and then, hey, it's okay. Or I can ride in a car with rubber wheels, it's okay. I just can't drive it. I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
So this is the fight and the attitude that I'd like to see, that we don't just lay down and take this. I mean, we're all going to die within this week because that road's going to be getting more houses. It's something that has to be solved immediately. However, you know, it's
And that was the idea that I was impressing upon Samuel out there. He also had brought up paying a little tax. He called it a tax for going for repairing the roadway out in front. So I know that they know of that concept and how it works. I don't know for sure how we would actually implement that. We would have to work with other counties to do it. But my biggest impression I was trying to make on Samuel was that when we do an overlay like this, we're expecting to get at least 25 years out of the life of the pavement. And by using steel wheels as he is on that 1,000-foot stretch, we're not going to get 10 years out of that particular location. And that's not what all of the taxpayers in the county paid for, including them. Their property gets assessed the same way as everybody else when it came to this bonding that we did to do the roadways in several locations around the county. But it benefits all of the people in the county that we did that. And we want to try to extend the life as much as we possibly can of that pavement, because we know we're not going to be able to bond in another 5 years for $1 million to redo that portion of the road as well as some other portions that we didn't get done this time around. That wouldn't be fair to the taxpayers as a whole. So I believe that at least Samuel has my position in mind when it comes to representation of all of the taxpayers across the county and how we feel about the particular damage that's being done. If you go and look at where the pavement has had brine or salt treatments put onto it, it tends to fade to a light gray after a while. And the horseshoes and the buggy wheels, lighter things that they pull down the road, sure, they're going to scar it up. They're just going to scar the surface. It's the heavier things like you were talking about that actually gouge the pavement, which means that the water can permeate down through the surface of it, freeze thaw, and begin that process of deterioration a lot sooner than what we want. And that is what I'm trying to get through to the community as a whole by going to talk to Bishop Mance. And I think at that point in time, I need to have my county attorney along with me so that we have two people at least, when they're talking about this, that we don't have this, well, he said, she said kind of thing happening. And I want it to be able to be documented in some way that they are going to take some responsibility for what they are doing, because it is above and beyond what you as a farmer in the community out there would do to the roadway. And one of the suggestions I had made is, are you allowed to use hard rubber rather than an inflated tire, a looser rubber tire? Because my son, who was in the Marine Corps, was a track vehicle mechanic, tanks, and all tanks are made now with a hard rubber surface on their treads out there, so that they can traverse not only across dry, barren ground or wet, moist ground, they can also travel up and down roadways, as long as they figure out how much weight that roadway can handle when they're on. And he said that's a big thing, that those tracks, again, are designed a specific way with the hard rubber already attached to them, and so they would replace a whole track setup at one time on it, which, you know, talking to him about it, Chauncey and I even had the idea of, like you said, taking some tires, putting them around them, clamping them on, and then taking them off once they got to where they needed to be. And I suggested loosely to Samuel about something like that, and he said absolutely no, they do not, they're not allowed to use any rubber tires like that in their operations. And so that's where, talking to the elders, we're going to have to try to see if we can't come to an agreement when it comes to that. You wouldn't necessarily need to do that, like I said, with a buggy or a horse, because again, the horses not only slide when they're going downhill into a scar in the surface of it, but as time goes by, those show up less when the surface of the pavement has faded in color. When it's black like it was this year, boy, they just stand right out. And it does look terrible on a brand new road to have that in that area, but next year it'll become less evident. The year after that, it'll become even harder to see unless you get out and actually look at it up close. So what I'm wanting to do is have them understand that those types of tractors, when they're pulling loads and all of the torque is based off of just those two rear drive wheels when they're out there, how they actually dig into the surface. And that's the thing that we want to avoid, because again, that's what's going to lead to quicker deterioration, having to put more money back in the roadway over the years because of maintenance that you wouldn't experience on, say, the Brookville Road or the Packwood Road, because we don't have those types of vehicles that run out there and operate. As you've seen with the sewer projects around town, on Old Highway 34, just to the east of the bridge where we transferred to the city, they lay down rubber mats that go from one side of the pavement to the other and then move their equipment across, and then a man stands there and he'll just pull them back and get them off the roadway. That's another suggestion that we can offer them as something to do to help mitigate some of these problems that we have. Also, traversing at a perpendicular angle instead of trying to run parallel with the roadway up and down it, it concentrates that area so that it's not quite as far that we have to maintain on a bigger level. And I agree with some of those things right now, that's where we should go, but I think that we need to get more involved with the leadership portion of the community so that we can have that with all of the areas out there, because again, like you said, they stretch all the way from up in the Germanville area south all the way to Lockbridge, and even farther south as you go from there down towards Round Prairie. So we need to be able to have a better relationship, I think, and sometimes, like you said, they refer to us as English and we're not part of their community unless we come and speak to them as leaders of our community to their leaders of their community. I don't think we're going to see much change at all. So I'm more in the mindset that that's the direction that we need to start working at.
Probably suggest that everyone go out and look at the damage that's happened on the first time.
Yes.
Okay, so it's, I mean, you can see the treads and bar tires.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is the first. I've been living there, I've just been waiting for this to take place. So that when he harvested these pumpkins and squash, this was the first that he put his tractor out there. So that's the damage on one season.
Right.
Well, and Pat will verify this, actually, so with Scott, this actually before Darren came on board, so this is when Dick was still here, I wanted to put an embargo on the road. And I know what the Supreme Court, what state Supreme Court ruled, but he modified those wheels. It's not even the standard steel wheel, he modified it. To me, all bets were off, but I've been told multiple times that, you know, and that's, I guess you'd say water under the bridge, so to speak, but the thing that kind of, I'm not sure I can get my arms around it, that I understand it. I understand, and I said this to Darren, that, you know, the different faiths have different faiths within the faith, you know, independent, Southern Baptist, so on and so on. I'm picking on Baptist, I'm just saying. Okay, that there's some interpretation there somewhere that they agree or disagree. It was always my understanding that the Amish didn't use gas-powered vehicles. Now we're using, right, they're using, yeah, they're using fuel-powered vehicles. Some of them, not all, but some of them.
Gas, water pumps, they're running irrigation.
Yeah.
So this group is totally powered.
Right. Right.
They all have tractors, they all have skid.
And they all use different forms of battery powered equipment out there as well. So we have to understand that some of them don't want to use electricity in their homes or anything like that because that's a tenet that they have, and yet they still use modern conveniences when it's convenient for them to use them. So
this is the debate that we can't
that's right. That's the one we can't win. This one with the maintenance of the roadway, though, is one that I believe that we have a good solid standing, that we should be able to work in agreement with the community, either that they contribute more to the repair of the roadway or they use these alternative ways of moving their equipment from one location to another, as we've talked about.
totally support the use of
Correct. Right.
Or at least let's get smooth tires. You can't do that on a tractor because you can slide. This is the issue.
Right. Or you wouldn't get any traction when you're out in the field itself.
Right. They have the ribs. They put these traction ribs on there for side sliding.
Mm-hmm.
So they have
Right.
I'm going to suggest whatever we do, if there is something, like someone like me will be, I'm going to tell them that I'm going to watch them and photograph them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to be a prick or a bad guy, it's just if there's no accountability, things are going to happen.
Correct.
Now, at this point, every time they pass, I just hope there's another time, but I'm going to start. Just go out there on my four-wheeler, come and get right ahead of them and take a picture of the implementer and the tractor they're doing, what they're doing. I think they need to haul them or rubber. Question.
And to that point, and I don't know that it's actually relevant, Pat would probably tell me it's not. That's why I love him. But Scott and I have had conversation, again, during this, back even before you came on, we have a gentleman who's up by the Polishville area, in between two bridges, neither one of which would support the semis coming there to pick up his milk and other things and so on and so forth. And so the expectation was, because he called us and asked us to come up and visit. So we went up and we visited, and I don't know if you were even on the board at that time. So it must have been, I think it was Steve. So we went up and we visited. The expectation was that we replaced one of those bridges to benefit him, and he was the only one on that road. understand completely what it was he wanted to do. It wasn't feasibly, we weren't feasibly able to do it at that particular moment in time, but we did go up and whatever you do to shore up so we could increase the weight limit on the bridge. My point is that it's okay for us to make special arrangements for them to accommodate their needs, but they're not willing to make arrangements with us to accommodate obvious issues that we have with what they're doing. And I, pardon this pun, I agree with Darren's approach at this point, but it needs to be a two-way street. And I don't want to specially assess you. I mean, I have the right within the law, or we have the right within the law to do a special assessment on those roads, just like sometimes the city does on city streets. But I don't think that you should have to pay a special assessment, once again, to accommodate something that they're doing.
So there's no zoning. If an Amish guy just wants to start a milk parlor, that should have to be taken into consideration. I was going to deliver his milk before we hit it, and we know the bridges and stuff. So I mean, this is part of the issue of not having zoning out in the country, which I'm not for it. But I mean, there's some responsibility to look down the road and say, how can I pull off this business? The roads, the bridges, and the access like that. And this is my issue with buying these farms on the highway. You want to buy a farm on the highway? I don't mind having them as neighbors. I enjoy the Amish as neighbors because guess what? They're ag people.
Right.
If my cow gets out, walks across their garden, they're not going to sue me. They're going to help me get the cow back, just like I do them. So I don't have an issue with having Amish neighbors. I just don't like the double standard. You go up to the Amish stores and you can buy all the outdated foods you want that none of my other stores here in town are able to leave out on the shelf. Why? You know, all the cash gets dealt so they don't pay the sales tax and all this and stuff. I have personal issues with how we do business and the hypocrisy of it. I don't want the double standard. I don't want, you know, let me throw a steel wheel tractor on and tell you that's my religion. I don't think religion should tie into that.
And that's my point exactly. We would hang you out to dry if you were running down the road.
Can you hang me out to dry if I sell outdated goods like all the stores? Go in the Amish store out there and just look. It's 6-8 months, sometimes a year. Outdated, it's just right there. There's nobody. Oh, it's just the Amish. Open to the public to shop there. So double standards what I'm against. I've said my piece. I'm available if you guys want to converse more. I'm going to start monitoring what goes on, not as a little spy, but just like I called on this issue. I said, well, it's not. So if I see severe things happening, I'm going to go confront that all because I'm level-headed. I'm calm. I'm not a radical who wants to get in the fight, but I'm going to let each one know each time it happens that I don't agree with what you're doing.
Would you leave your name, contact, phone number, or email, whichever is more convenient for you? That way I can keep you in contact with what's going on with discussions, and when we move far enough ahead that we can actually have a full community type meeting in the area out there, I would like you to be part of it as well. So
They all know me.
Mm-hmm.
The Amish community all kind of knows me. They borrow my equipment and stuff. I've been there the whole time they've been there.
You're still in Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob's still in Florida?
Yeah, it's Colorado Springs.
Oh, he's not too far from there.
We got a wedding next month. You guys know Jim Morris here in town?
Yeah.
My daughter's marrying his son after 9 years of dating.
Sweet.
They've been high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
Got that next month.
Yeah. No, Darren was an engineer for Hewitt Corporation. Right now he's in Denver working on projects there. Quite often play softball.
All right, well,
I did want to ask one other thing. This latest situation that I went out and looked at and scraped the mud off the road. The tracks I'm seeing look like, you know, you got these cleats, yeah. But it also looks like whatever wagon it was pulling.
Right.
The front tires of the tractors often have a single rib in the center,
Right.
and that's for side slide in the fields.
Okay.
So that center rib, and some of their wagons have that center rib, because a smooth flat tire slides on the grass in the field, so they put a center rib to
Okay.
get that groove on the dirt to keep it from
I
sliding.
put it in the seam of that metal wheel.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's that groove you're seeing. They put something there to concentrate all that weight on one spot. Works fine in the field. But this is what's causing damage.
So they weren't pulling a wagon?
Well, they wouldn't pull the wagon, yes.
But the grooves you're seeing are on the front tire of that tractor.
Okay.
Right.
So even if they're not pulling a wagon, when they're driving these tractors empty from one farm to the other because they borrow and share a lot.
And I took note of that as well on the tractor, because he was using that at the time to pull a wagon with pumpkins and gourds and stuff on it. They were preparing to take to auction in Kelowna, I guess, a vegetable auction that they take a lot of stuff to. Had all tomatoes and everything out there, but they were putting them into big boxes, and then they were using their skid loader to load those onto the wagon, and then they were going to take the wagon to wherever they needed to load everyone's all together at. And we had a discussion when it came to that as well. And you're right, the front wheels on that tractor did have that rib down through the center, as you were talking about, but it also had pieces of rebar welded onto it as well, at that same kind of angular, so that you could get a bite with it. But these aren't drive wheels, so you know the bite would only be as if he was trying to turn one way or another with it. And I'm with you. It's something that we need to address right now, especially with the roadway as a new condition, and that we don't want to have it damaged. And again, yes, you can assess property owners for upgrading a road from the condition that it's currently in to a newer condition. And that's usually used with construction. If you're going to reconstruct the roadway, or if you're going to add wider shoulders, or have to buy a larger easement for having the road bed out there in the first place because of depth of ditches or whatever case that may be. So unless you're doing a true upgrade to it, I don't think that the county, like the city, cannot do a special assessment just for that. The special assessments, again, are more based off of if you're doing a dramatic upgrade of the road itself. And I don't want to see that happen, because there's a whole lot of people other than the ones that are causing this type of damage along that roadway that don't need to pay for something like that.
Because there's so few in between his farm, the next neighbor's farm. The assessment is extremely high.
Well, the other side of that you're not making note of is that if it's true ag ground, if you're planting something or doing something in the field out there, that cannot be assessed. It's only your property taxes on your frontage of your home area that can have a special assessment levied to it.
360 feet, but it, you know, it's, the formula takes in the cost. It's on, look at this on 227th down by America Inn for those folks. Well, and actually, we were going to do both sides of the road. We only ended up doing America Inn side because we were going to special assess the other side, and the cost for those folks was enormous because they were the only ones there.
Right.
Tracks that I took pictures of, where they're going straight up the road. You got the lines and you got the treads. But when they turn, you can see places where there's a tread and a track going here, and then there's just a track going somewhere nearby. So I'm assuming that's either wagon or the front tire.
That would be the wagon more than likely, because it would be like turning movement, trailing for a wagon is offset from the vehicle that's actually towing it, and you have to have a larger turn radius in order to accommodate that. I know quite a little bit of road knowledge. I have a lot of road knowledge because I've worked in the field for 40 years with either private consultants or public entities.
I want you to keep in mind, it's the same tractor, the same wagon, the same load. It had a year ago.
Right.
Right, it's just a matter of time till one of these boys or whatever takes off with a whole load. They have grinder mixers and they haul up the road full of feed. Just keep the wheels and cleats on. Not even credit.
I took pictures and I told Scott, he had one wheel on the shoulder.
Right.
I appreciate that, but the concern I have is it chew up the edge of the road. Because, you know, if you're not have wide enough there, so you've only got part of that wheel off, so now that wheel is hammering the edge of that road, and so now we start breaking up the edge of that road.
Right.
Even when you
Right.
You know, have the issue with the huge rear tanks and stuff. Back to the, you can argue with me when you're talking about weight per square inch. Hold a lot of manure. There's a point when you're breaking off the side of the roads or kind of. That's not a perfect scenario. Perfect scenarios, right? I appreciate your concern. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Please stay home. Use me if you need me. I'll kind of keep an eye out. And like I said, I get along with my neighbors like I would. I'll visit with them. All right, Stan.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Here, I'm going to give you my cell phone number so
So,
that you can have it and contact me if you want to.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming in. Yeah, that's where I was at, what I was looking at.
so yeah, I meet this week. Is that gonna be the?
We're going to do that.
I mean, if you want us all to go.
No, I think at this point in time, like I said before, it will be Chauncey and I meeting with Bishop Mass first, and then trying to set up a larger meeting with the community after we at least get some sort of understanding of what we're looking at. Because we have to plant a seed in order to grow the crop, and we can't grow things when we aren't planting these seeds. And this is something that, like I said, it affects the taxpayers all the way across the county, because we have assessed everyone for that roadway out there and the improvement that we did with it. So
I appreciate it.
well, thank you. I feel that's part of what I need to do. My obligation to our constituents all the way across the board needs to be looked at that way. So that was a very good discussion, and we're going to move on now to discuss and consider nuisance properties of non-compliant property owners.
So I put this back on, and I had conversations with Mark, that's why I asked him to be here, and Bruce if he can't. And then Pat subsequently from our last meeting sent out an email, which I appreciate.
Yes, it was a very good email. Long, but good.
I questioned why the Gridley estate was dismissed, and that's a separate issue. And Pat explained it to me. Once again, I think the world of guy, but while his explanation is good, that's another story. Anyway, my point is that I went out again and looked at a lot of properties. We don't know for sure what's happening with the Nathan Harriman property, other than we know that the property is transferred, but the transfer, the deed or whatever you want to call it, has not been recorded as of yet, so we don't have any leverage against the new organization. And I don't know if we have any leverage against Nathan. And of course, if we go out and clean that property up, who actually was the money without giving them time? We don't know where or whom to send the letter to, you know, a new letter. That's just one issue. The two properties up in Abington, one adding to the nuisance, albeit they're paying their fine. The other one, you know, we got a judgment, but You know, that's all that's happening. We got properties up, actually 3 properties up in East Pleasant Plain. The Paxton property, I think the name of the property, east of Paxton on the same side of the road. Mobile home there, it's all overgrown. They used to raise horses there. It's all right. You know who I mean, the fact is that they're there. The Boyd property, we cleaned up as a county. I don't know, Scott, were you here or was Tom still here?
I wasn't here when it
So-
happened. I just remember.
I know
hearing
Steve
about
was still on the board. We spent $8,000 cleaning that property up. Currently, there's $21,500. Paxton property, nice little ranch style home. Mr. Paxton has passed away. Some of the neighbors helped to clean it up. The son did a little bit, but it's a long way from being, oh, it sold at a tax sale. Paxton's property sold at a tax sale. Okay, do we know who bought it? Maybe that's who we need to send. I was not aware of that. But my point simply is,
So they don't know.
they don't own it yet, okay. So my point simply is that if you read in Pat's email, he talks about the $50 a month on the payments and so on and so forth. So if you have $750 and some court cost tacked on that, so let's say it's $800 at $50 a month, you know, we're talking about 15, 16 months. And in the case of, well, I'm just saying, in the case of Marty Rainbolt, so in 15 or 16 months, he's paid off his fine, but he hasn't mitigated his nuisance. By the same token, there is a mechanism by which if the county goes in and cleans it up, we can assess the property tax according to the ordinance. We can invoice them. If they don't pay the invoice, we put it on the property tax. If it doesn't go to a tax sale, we can, I don't know what the technical term is, but the jury. Okay, and it goes to the county. At that point, the county can. Okay, so then the county can take you say, well, yeah, but that takes 19 months. Well, we've got 16 months of waiting to have a fine paid and absolutely nothing done to the property in the context. So here we are, we, as far as I'm concerned, kicked the can down the road for 16 months, gained absolutely nothing. And 3 months after that fact, we could have owned the property and at least turned the property to some extent to recoup some of the money that we've expended, or you know, somebody else like a neighbor that might be interested in that property might buy it, or in this case, Mr. Paxton's property goes up for a tax sale because it's a fairly nice property. We know the Boyd property, you know, you say, well, do you want to put another $5,000, $6,000 into that property? Hamilton on North Hugh Hamilton's been, it's another one that his family's trying to get him to do something about that property. And that's just a few. The Fitzsimmons property down in the back of the county, right north of the county line. Yes, we'd expend a lot of money cleaning these properties up, but I think initially it might send the message. And my question is, if all we're going to do is sit back here and collect $50 a month and not mitigate the nuisance, then why do we have it? That's my whole point. Either we have to take the next step and be willing to send out these notices to these property owners that we have every intent of coming in and cleaning up that property and assessing, you know, invoicing them or assessing the property tax, and then take the steps to take that property under our control and dispose of it. And I look at it this way. If we assess their property tax and they don't pay the property tax, you know, even if they don't pay the property tax without us, we do it right now with our rust bills. We pay, for example, in East Pleasant Plain, we pay the sewer bills for those properties. That's the 2080 agreement that we have with Russ. And then we assess that taxpayer. If they don't pay that special assessment, it goes up for a tax sale. It's not anything that's new. It's not anything that we're not already doing, albeit a different agreement. Or, you know, as far as a 2080 agreement as opposed to an ordinance. It seems to me that it's blatantly unfair. I don't think that it's right. Kind of goes the same argument we just had about the other situation. That Ronnie Nordyke goes to great expense to clean up that 3 acres of junk that he has. And he did indeed do that. While he's staring at the guy across the road, that, yeah, he's paying his $50 a month and he's adding to his nuisance. I'm wanting to send out notices to all of these properties that have thumbed their nose at us. Okay, you know, whether they're paying a fine or not, because they're in the second or the third phase of this and saying, okay, this is it. We're sending you a notice, giving you 30 days, and then we will come in and clean it up and assess you for it. That's what the ordinance says that we can do. And if we're not going to apply the ordinance, why do we have it? That's the only thing that I'm saying. Now, I realize we're talking about spending money here.
Right, because we're talking about hiring a contractor to come out and do it, because we aren't doing it with our secondary road personnel, because I don't believe that's a good use of our personnel.
Well,
And
well, we set aside $300,000 in this fiscal year for ambulances. We've used about $100,000 of it. We still need to have, we still need to at least set aside or keep in escrow, if you will, another 75,000 just for, you know, anything. But there's still potentially at least $100,000 there that we could use that's already budgeted for in this fiscal year. I'm not suggesting that we go off half-cocked out here. I went out to the Indigo property, to the Lawson property. They haven't done anything. They might have had a bulldozer in there and they moved the trash up to the end of the driveway and they moved the camper out of the right of way further up the driveway on the left side. I was just out there Friday. Okay, they've done nothing to that property. You can't even see the mobile home for the weeds. And there's what, I don't know, 8, 10 cars out there on each side of that driveway. Yeah, okay, nothing's been done. Now they're under the impression, I guess, that they think they cleaned it up.
So what's your conversations with them?
Kent and Greg, another employee of mine, met out there about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And they really thought they were done. And we've got pictures, and there's piles amongst piles of trash and pop bottles. I mean, it's unfathomable that they would think that they cleaned up the property.
So in your estimate, if we cleaned them up, what would be the top 3 ones to start with?
Top 3, Rainbow, that one would be a good one. And Fitzsimmons would also be another, lots and lots and lots of trash.
In the case of Fitzsimmons, he's out there in the middle of nowhere, and I'll be honest with you, he's bothering absolutely nobody, except, you remember, you're the one that got the complaint from a property owner. Presumably the one just to the south of it. I don't know if they're planning to build there or whatever, but that one we acted on completely on a complaint.
We've got some of these that were cited over 2 years ago.
right, right.
And
And we've had that one that you discussed with us the last time where they just moved piles of junk from one location to another,
that's the one
just
out there on
rearranging it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
it's crazy. I mean, you got Rainbows, and then across the road you got Brown. Brown didn't even show up for court case. And we've spoke to him many times. I mean, he was supposed to call in here. You remember that's probably been about a year ago, and he never called in. You know, it's just one of those things that kind of out of sight, out of mind, and thinks we're just going to go away. Our position on it, and I absolutely agree. I think it's, if anybody is not cleaned up their nuisance by now, they're going to receive the, you know, my recommendation would be to send them the third and final notice, or the last notice we're going to give them, and then take action.
right.
How specific are you? Very, as far as what the expectation is for a clean property.
Well, the nuisance ordinance itself defines what a nuisance is. It's 6 or 7 categories. And when the first letter goes out, it lists what categories they're in violation of. So there is no, you cannot, I mean, if you get, and I don't have it in front of me, I do, but it doesn't matter. If you get number 3 and it's junk automobiles, okay? There's no question because it states right in the letter, junk automobiles. There are exceptions to that ordinance if you're in the salvage business, you know, things of that nature.
Mhm.
We cited one here recently that the individual is going to license all the vehicles.
He called us letter last week, days. The 30 days would be hard to do because when you work with us, and I kept holding on the phone, it was as much as you can get done, we'll review it at the end of 30 days and we'll go from there. So it's not like we don't work with the individuals to try to give them some time. A lot of them's cleaned it up within 30 days. You know, we mitigated a lot of nuisances within the county. It's just these ongoing, it just isn't moving.
We had one up by over north up here, and we cited the individual, and he said, you know, that he was a licensed salvage dealer. So all we asked him to do was provide us with, and he did, with the documentation, and that was, but there was no question that he didn't know what it was he was being cited for. That was in the letter. And like I said, there's, you know, we talk about hazardous material, undergrowth, whatever you want to call it, dilapidated houses, you know, hazardous material, if I didn't already say anything. And each, there are, like, 6, 7 categories that we have defined, or actually I should say that the attorneys have defined for, constitutes a nuisance. And so I don't think that in the black and white, when you look at it, that there can be any question, and in the case of losses, because they were cited for all of them. There can't be any question as to, you know, in my estimation, what constitutes their nuisance. We actually, Becky was still here, Dick and I and Becky went up and we stood up there with Marty and we went through all of it personally with him. Keep in mind, again, before both of you were here, Judy Hannah and a bunch of her friends went up. Marty was still in jail, and Judy and her friends went up there. Not only did they clean up the outside, they cleaned up the inside. And, you know, as good neighbors, if you will. I just, like I said all along, and you know this, and Bruce knows this, and so does Ken, I don't have a dog in the hunt. All I'm saying is if you've got an ordinance, either you enforce it or you repeal it. And to me, there is no in between on it, because I think we open ourselves up for all kinds of problems. How do I go make John Doe do this and not Joe Smith?
Phone call on Friday, it was exactly that. Why did you make me clean mine up? And then they're looking at the one down the way, and we're not doing anything there. And I told them we were having this, you know, this discussion today. They were unable to come because I encouraged them to come, but they were unable to come. But I told them I was really come about the decision to them. So
Look at the Apple property down in Glasgow on the corner. I can't tell if it's the north-south road. It's right on the corner of Glasgow and that road. He came in, I'd have to go through I've got it, but the point is he came in quite some time ago, a year ago anyway, probably. And like me, he tore his fingers up and he lost some fingers. And so, I mean, he was in bad shape. I said, hey, you know, let's wait till everything heals. We're okay with that. We don't want you to do anything. So it's worse now than it ever was because he added to it. And he's done nothing. And he's been cited. It went to, I think Applear is one of the ones that was on, I may be wrong, it was one of the ones that was on the list. But I know it's gone to the county attorney's office. And that's the other thing. We've got, you know, Pat and Michael and Chauncey, they got a lot of time invested in this that they could probably be doing other things. And the court system, I don't think that the court system is necessarily our friend, because, and I don't mean it to say it the way that sounded, but they're not going to assess the fine and say you've got 1 week to pay it. They're going to let them spread it out, and it doesn't do us any good. And you know, you can maybe make the argument if you had enough of them going out there that you could use that money coming in and clean up another property. And I go back to however many years ago it was. How long have you been here? Yeah. No, Scott. How long have you been with us? Just a little over 8 years. So more than 8 years ago, we spent $8,000 cleaning up the Boyd property. I would not be surprised that it would be twice that much to do the same thing today as it was 8 years ago. The property right north of it, Hamilton's, we cut a damn tree down. You know, as well as there's another property that you can't see. One of the galling things about that was that I harassed Bruce about spending $2,500 of rust money to put a sewer stub in for that house because they didn't do it when they went by to put in the sewer. And Mr. Hamilton came in and said, hey, he says, my daughter owns this or something or another, and she may want to put in a double wide or whatever. And so now he wants us to stop billing him for the sewer. And we told him, you got to tear down the house. If there's no house, they will stop billing you for the sewer. But they spent, I remember it's $2,500 or $3,000 to put that sewer. And they thumb our nose at us. And we've got several properties that the Gridley estate. On that Gridley estate, I think that piece of ground would sell if we went in there and cleaned it up. You know, Pat expressed that the young man that's paying it, you know, and I don't particularly want to hammer that young man by any stretch of the imagination, but just maybe if we sent those folks a letter and said, hey, we're going to come in and clean it up and assess your property tax, maybe, just maybe it might get them off top dead center. If it doesn't,
then we have to actually do what we say we're going to do.
I agree.
And a lot of times in the past, and of course, this is something I found out just after I started, is that people will come in and the board will be sympathetic to the plight that they're putting on us and will allow an extension. And we have already made a decision as a board that we are not going to do that any longer, that we need to actually enforce what's going on. And I think that's why some that aren't cleaning up their properties feel that they don't have to, because they'll just come in and ask for a hardship and all of this. We've got to steel ourselves against that and move forward with enforcement of the ordinance. And if that means cleaning it up and actually doing that at the expense of the county and then putting it on their property taxes or just a straight billing for what's going on.
First, I think the ordinance allows us to do that. But every one of those folks that came in, and Darren's exactly right, but every one of those folks that came in, I dated their letter for the extension that they asked for. So we know when that extension was up.
Mhm.
And Bruce and Kent and Jeff and the rest of them, Greg acted accordingly in that respect. And you nailed it as far as I'm concerned. We didn't want to be a horse's patoot going into this thing, but we thought, okay, maybe with a different, you know, coming at it from a different angle, being more objective, and we had some success. I think probably the individual that you're talking about, we gave them quite a bit of time to clean that up. They were responsible enough and had enough pride in whatever you want to say in what they were doing that they took the initiative and did it.
Well, and Pat says here, you know, there's 13 resolves, so we have had some success. I'm also looking at his email, and the ones he would recommend, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, is Mercer, Wood, Bertlow, and the other possibilities would be Brown, Ringgold, Napa. So
Well,
we need to, yeah, go ahead.
and Dee, the reason I picked those, because I appreciate what Bruce is talking about, because, you know, they've been to the properties and seen them and maybe they definitely have a different perspective in terms of what is the most pressing issues. The ones that I highlighted are the ones that have really not engaged at all in the process. They've just sort of ignored it, which from my end is the most frustrating folks to work with. That's Mercer, Boyd, Bertlow. And then the ones that have signed the stipulations, but the civil penalty came due before they got it cleaned up. All of those folks are making their payments except for Brown and Harriman. And we know the circumstance that Harriman is in. That's sort of unique currently. So that's why I highlighted those. But it is not from a position of any type of, you know, what is the most urgent need in terms of cleanup. It's my perspective is, who are the people who have ignored or done the least amount of engagement in the process, at least as it relates to the part that I've been directly involved in.
Okay, thanks.
Pat, as a legal question, as far as what our ability to do in regards to the nuisance ordinance, we have a property, the Paxton property is sold in 2019 at a tax sale. Now the $3,000 that's owed is currently owed, and that's what they paid when they bought it. Well, the entity that's bought at the tax sale.
No.
Okay, okay. So my point is that because it was bought at a tax sale, but it hasn't transferred yet, because it'll be next year before it's free, and the son has the opportunity to redeem it, although I don't believe that he will. Do we still have the right per our ordinance, even though it's in transition, if you will, to go in and clean that property up and assess the property tax?
Well, you are required to provide notice to the owner or the person in possession. And the owner would be difficult to notice currently, because, you know, he passed away.
Right.
And I don't think there's anybody that is currently in possession or living there. So, until there's some sort of an estate opened, or until somebody moves in there, or until we somehow get a legal owner, that's the barrier there.
Okay.
So it has nothing to do with the tax sale. The tax sale is just sort of an, I don't know, added bonus.
Right.
I mean, even if your property sells at a tax sale and there's a tax certificate issued, you know, until that deed issues, which is closer to 3 years from the tax sale than 2,
Right.
you know, you are still the owner. So the issue there is identifying the appropriate entity to serve. Because if we don't serve the right person and we make the payments, we may not be able to assess anybody, and we might just have to eat that cost.
Right.
So that's the issue there.
Okay, perfect. That's what I needed to know. So all I'm asking the board to do is determine whether or not you want to enforce the ordinance as it's currently constituted, or do you want to repeal it? If we're going to enforce it, then we need to start sending out the third phase or whatever phase it is of the letter, indicating to, and we don't have to jump in and do them all at once, right? But, you know, whether it's Marty Rainbow, whether it's Mr. Fitzsimmons, whether it's Mr. Boyd, the Wasson property, although I think there's 4 right there that would be, we send out the notices, and I think we send it out to all of them so that we're not necessarily picking and choosing, but I hate to use the word target, but focus on, because we can't do all the properties all at once.
Right, and I suggest we would go with the ones that.
We've got another right down here on 1,008 Oakwood Drive.
Start with the highest priorities and work our way down from there. And I think that we've got at least a plan in place in order to do that. I think that, Pat, you would agree that that's, I think, a good place to start at here, that we have to actually do something. We can't keep putting it off as if we're hoping that they'll do something with it, because we have all the strongest evidence that they're not going to do anything about it. And so now is the time that we need to actually enforce it as we have laid it out. And if we don't do it, then we're just ruining ourselves for the rest of it. And again, Lee, you're right. If we don't do it, why do we have the ordinance in the first place? We need to rescind it. And I don't want to rescind it.
That's why we started the process, because we needed to see it through. So it's time to see it through.
Yep.
So my mind jumps to how. So
Well, I think the
do we
first
do a bid and get to see who's going to clean these up and what they're going to charge? How do we proceed with that piece?
Well, I think in the process, I don't know that we can promise anybody, but I think in the process, I don't know, I'm sure Pat, do you happen to remember the gentleman that, you've been here long enough, his name was Bob. He moved furniture for us up and down the stairs in the courtroom when we were remodeling. He's the one that cleaned the Boyd property. Do you remember what his name was? Bob?
Not off the top of my head, but I think he helped when we moved the office over here, so I may be able to locate it.
Bob?
Yeah, Abby said it was Bob Kiefer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's correct.
I don't know, I don't even know if Bob's still in business or not. But I mean, he went up and cleaned up the Boyd property, and there was no, you know, and depending upon, and probably need to get an answer from Pat. If we go, for example, and clean up the Rainbow property, do we take possession of the vehicles, and can we take them to Fine Guards or Fine Golds or whatever the hell it is, and sell them to recoup some of the money? Or is I mean, we don't want to store his property, right? I mean,
Right. No, when we did the Boyd property, the junk vehicles, any of the things that were unregistered, the people doing the cleanup actually were able to, scrap or do whatever they needed to do with in order to.
Property of the contractor is what you're talking about, so.
Right.
So the individual that cleaned up the Nordike property, for example, they took those vehicles and did whatever, and all that other stuff.
Mhm.
That we could probably ascertain from Ronnie or Carol Nordike, or Delbert for that matter, who that individual was. Somebody that
Actually, we had the Bishop Body Shop was one of the nuisance citations that was successfully cleaned up and dismissed. And that gentleman has engaged in some nuisance cleanup for, I think, maybe the city of Batavia.
okay.
But he, I don't know that he does that work anymore. I think he is recently employed by, one of the factories or foundries in town, and that business is no longer a primary business, or maybe it's the other way around. I honestly don't remember, but that might be a resource as well.
Sure.
Hey, Pat, when it comes to the vehicle stuff, if, say, whoever's cleaning it up takes a vehicle, would I be able to get a list with VIN numbers so I can note that in my system? So,
We could require that of whoever we contract.
what's that?
We could require that of whomever we contract to do the cleanup.
Yeah, then I could note on there that this vehicle has been taken per a cleanup or something like that, so it helps our side as well.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that.
There's another issue about the Rainbow property. One time the board and I talked about, and Pat was involved, about vacating the street that's next to them, and that didn't ever happen.
Right.
And, Dick didn't want it to happen until it was cleaned up. And then when it was cleaned up, Marty says, well, I don't want it. I want to keep it as a street. I said, well, you've got a garage on it.
Yeah.
It's either got to be an open street or a garage on your vacated half of the street. And well, he wasn't willing to go ahead with that. And the board has had situations where one party didn't want to go ahead with the road vacation. So all of the work just more or less went to waste because they voted no, we're not going to vacate it.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering what the situation will be on this half street that he might have junk on besides.
I think the other half is on the Gridley estate, is it not?
Half the street is on the property that's,
Yeah, so that's a Gridley estate. So we're pretty well screwed in that regard. If Marty doesn't want to take it, we can't do anything with the Gridley estate.
well, they would each get half of it. It doesn't, there's,
Right, and that would mean that they would be assessed then for that property. They would be taxed. Once it's vacated and transferred to the property owner, that increases their property tax,
yeah.
wouldn't it? Mark, I would think that would be the case. And so that would be why Marty would have probably put a protest up against doing that. And with Gridley now being deceased and no estate established, how would we transfer that jurisdiction back or the property back to that owner? And we would have to wait probably till the estate or disposition of the property on into the future in order to do it.
Unless there's a way just to vacate Marty's side of the street.
I don't think we would want to do that, leave a half street or half alley out in any location.
As far as I know, we
you know.
still have a whole bushel basket full of streets and alleys in Abington that people, you can't even see in half of them anymore. There's a whole community that no longer exists that was platted at one point in time.
Right, and at the time we talked about the street next to Marty, we were talking about other streets and alleys in the vicinity.
And it's certainly something we can look at, but the issue is too, and I probably should need to talk to Greg. There may be a possibility in some areas where they'll need some law enforcement presence as far as that part of it goes. But that being said, I just think we reach out and try and see who we can get to do it. But I think we send out the letters to everybody. We don't pull our punches in that regard. We can't do everybody, but we can look at the ones that we want to start with in those terms and see where we're at. And then I think if we get a response from folks saying, you know, to go back to what Darren said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I don't exactly know if this is what he meant, but I don't want him to come in here then and say, well, I can get this done in 60 days. The letter says 30 days.
Right.
Okay. Now, maybe we can look at it at the end of 30 days, you know, under the advice of Kent and Bruce and say, hey, look, you know, they got 95% of it done. Let's, you know, okay, I'm perfectly fine with that. I just don't want us to get back into the modus operandi of extending it and extending it.
Right. And that's where we need to put our foot down, and you're exactly right with what I was trying to get across. If we give them 30 days to do this, and they have that 30 days only, and they should know that they won't be allowed to get an extension, whether they've got 75% of the stuff cleaned up or if they've got none of the stuff cleaned up. No extension should be given once we're doing this third notice, final notice of what's going on out there, and that's on our shoulders. And so we need to, again, like I said, steel ourselves against some of these arguments that have gotten us to the point where we've extended it and then seen nothing as a result of it.
And we haven't extended anything since we made that decision.
No, we have not.
So that's been clear. I think what we need to do is just say, hey, yeah, we're going to send out the letter. Now's the time because the weather's still decent. And
Pat, once we send out that letter that says you've got 30 days to comply, or else, are we required then to notify them a second time when we intend to move on the property?
I don't think that's in the ordinance, but you know, it's probably a decent idea. Just because, you know, if somebody were to come on, you get a notice from the county and then 6 months later, somebody comes in and just starts taking your stuff. That is certainly going to cause some questions and maybe some conflict, and you want to avoid all those things as well.
Right.
One of the things that I think in terms of, you know, hey, we can send these notices, but if we're not going to be prepared to act on all of the notices at one time, right. You know, the further away you get from the notice, the more concerning it gets on my, in terms of, you know, obviously we have complied with the ordinance, right? But if somebody wants to challenge the action or challenge the assessment somewhere down the line, they say, well, we got a notice, but nothing happened for 15 months. So, you know, I thought it was over, or, you know, when does that notice expire? Those things aren't in the ordinance. So I think that, you know, to the need for multiple notices over time, you don't want to pick and choose, but you are going to prioritize which ones are the biggest concerns, and, you know, get your priority list and notice 2 or 3 of them and be prepared to act on them if the 30 days pass and you haven't done anything. And I mean, shoot, publicize the note or your priority list so that people who are 4th on the list know, shoot, I'm next. And I've seen it happen. I mean, you can do things like that. But I don't want to get to the point where the notice is stale, which is why we've talked about sending out this additional notice at this point if we're going to move forward. And why Bruce and I, you know,
so we could publicize a list
together
and then start on 1, 2, and 3, and act on those, and then go to 4, 5, and 6. When I mean 4, 5, and 6, at that point we send out the letter, but we publicize the list so they've kind of officially been put on notice.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what you want to do is you're hoping to gain compliance from those further down the list by acting on those at the top of the list, right? Whether you send the notice or not, that's the goal. Right. So, like I said, I don't want the notice to become stale or that become an argument or an issue somewhere down the line. And I don't want to be serving or providing notices over and over and over again. Because then it looks like the parent talking to their kid, oh, if you do that again, if you do that again, if you do that again. I mean,
Company sells a tax sale and then 2 years later, 3 years later, somebody takes it over and then a week after they take possession, somebody shows up, starts cleaning it up.
All right, so
That's, say Marty has a bunch of stuff besides his garage on that street. So it's still a public street, I guess. Does that mean that, that I have to make him give him notice, get all that stuff, including the garage, off of the street? Or we'll come in and, what do I say? We'll come in and move it onto his property? Or we'll come in and haul it away? If we decide we're gonna,
you're talking about cleaning up the right of way.
yes.
yeah,
Typically when we clean right of way, we just move it off of the right of way. We don't take possession.
So I could just move it onto their property?
Yep.
And there's several places like that where they got a car that's halfway on the right of way, and halfway on a property. I could just, I have to give them notice, and it might get damaged when we move it off. Are we protected from not having to pay that damage?
Well, there's a separate section on cleaning, on keeping the right of way clear. So it's sort of a different issue than the nuisance issue. But I'll look that up and I'll send you some information on that.
Okay, that'd be great.
all right. So at this point, then we've kind of made a resolve here that we need to establish that list, send out notices based off of the list that we've established on priorities for cleanup of the properties, probably starting, like we said, with the worst of the worst first and then working our way down. Yeah, I think we should rely on Bruce in order to provide us with that list. So we should be able to have something that we can at least start moving on through the attorney's office with this letter by the end of the week.
We have the letter ready to go.
Oh, you do?
Pat's reviewed it. I put it together last week. Pat reviewed it. We're good to go on that. It's just a matter of putting it in an envelope and sending it out.
Okay, so,
One question I have, hey, Pat, do we want to send that certified mail because we've had some people not pick them up? Or do we just want to send it via regular mail? It doesn't specify the ordinance.
Let's take a look here. Because I think we have to prove that they receive it because they get 30 days from the receipt of the letter. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we have to they either have to pick it up or we'll have to serve them.
Okay.
And we just served one. Kent and I were working on one when we just got served. So we can, on a first go around. So, I mean, we have a mechanism to do that if we need to.
Okay. So that's what we'll do. We'll send that certified mail to start with.
Have anybody in your world of influence that might do this kind of thing? Okay.
Okay. There's a guy that I know somewhat, and he does a lot of joking and kind of side job stuff. He have the equipment to do it, skid loaders and stuff like that.
And if with the board's permission, I'll reach out to Ron, all about the procedure they use.
right.
It's from around Aldi, I believe. We use, so.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to talk to at least a couple of them and see what they do.
All right.
Pat may know who they use because Pat spoke to him on the phone many times.
So,
The guy that they hired.
yeah. So why don't you do that, Lee? Go ahead and make that contact. Do that so we can find out who we could hire in order to be able to start cleaning these up that have not been cleaned up by the property owners as directed in the past. So, all right, we'll move on and we'll make committee reports. We'll start with Dee. Do you have any reports from this last week?
Pat, you want to say anything about that, Mr. Chair? We haven't met since March.
Thank you, Bruce. Pat, are you still there?
I am. I didn't hear D. Sorry.
Any words of wisdom you want to share from ACT committee?
No, I mean, it was our first meeting in 6 months, so it was certainly nice to get the group back together. We just kind of got updates and saw how people have been sort of survived and maybe evolved through the COVID-19 disruption to a lot of these services. It was nice to have the school back involved. As always, we put together another ACT Facts to share with our community partners. This one involving smoking, vaping, the use of illegal substances and how it impacts the lungs and how that makes a person potentially more susceptible to very negative effects from viruses like COVID-19.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, it was just nice to be able to connect with those folks again because it had been 6
And
months.
I think the benefit was just so people can reconnect and know resources and kind of what's going on. The next day after that, I had a small group of Bridges Out of Poverty because our group had not met since March either. And so we're going to be looking at that and what we can reasonably do or should be doing, given everything. But we know the need is higher now because of COVID. Had a workforce development meeting, and Pathfinders is going to be the fiscal agent for them. And then I finally heard back from my contact in the state on the food insecurity invoices, because I had emailed him just because I'd sent in several weeks ago and hadn't heard anything. So now he's decided he wants them all on one invoice. So we'll get that to him today. So hopefully we'll be seeing some reimbursement on that soon.
Okay, Lee, did you have any committee reports?
We met out at the new ambulance base, base B, however you want to say it, for a photo shoot for our ambulances. They will be, I need to get a hold of Mike today. They will be stationed at Iowa City for the time being. They have them up there, loading them all up and getting, stocking and so on and so forth. They should start concrete today, and they expect to have it fully up by October 1st. The house is ready to go. They've got the drains and everything in place. So, and I can't tell you if it's a 3 or 4 bay. I think probably 3. And the rigs look really nice. I'm going to send it to Ray, ask him to print it out on his color machine so so that you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a lease agreement in place so that they're insured. They're insured through
2 or 3
2 or 3
rigs.
2. We have 2. A lease agreement with CARE. They're insured through CARE's carrier. Like just vehicle insurance liability, home collision, all that stuff. And we are just waiting. All of their hires are in place at this point, so they're ready to step in as of October 1st. And I think for the most part it'll be a smooth transition. I think the only hiccups might be getting everything completed out there in terms of the ambulances, but I'm excited.
Good.
So that's out on 227?
Yes, just west of the spec building, there's a ranch style house out there. Yeah. Or not west, I'm sorry, east.
I don't know where it's at.
Okay, I went to, I had 2 different meetings this week. One that I attended in person last Friday, the Southern Iowa Detention Services. We made some improvements down at the detention center, which is located next to the law center in Lee County, Fort Madison. The roof has some work that's needing done on it that we've contracted for, and it's going to be taken care of. We also are changing some things around inside the building. There's some carpeted areas that are going to be replaced with a vinyl type flooring. more durable, less wear and tear over years on it. So there's improvements that are happening down there. Currently, we didn't experience a whole lot of loss of individuals that were incarcerated there because of COVID, but there have been some changes made inside the facility in order to accommodate more distancing. And of course, when everyone's released to be in the activity area, then they have some problems there that are inherent with people being too close and that type of thing. But as far as the clients there, they're still able to go to school and do what they're supposed to do when they're required for high schooling or middle schooling, whichever they are involved with, and they've been able to work that really well. So we're doing pretty good that direction. There was a kind of a terrible accident that happened with one of the employees. They were killed via a mowing accident. So we're looking at trying to replace that person at this time by advancing another supervisor into that supervisory position, which will open up a incoming employee. Usually those are taken from their part-time employees that they currently have on staff, because they're the ones that would like to move up and into this position. So once that takes place, then one of the part-time employees then would move up, and we would hire a part-time employee at the lowest end of what we're doing right now. And most of that involves with the transports. Most of the part-timers do a brunt of that, and occasionally cover for officers that have to be off because of sickness or injury or that type of missing work. So we're moving along there really well. I also had a SIDCA meeting this week. We discussed the fact that we have no more funding coming in because there was no appropriation made by the legislature in order to do that. We're finishing up on a few projects that are done in the western half of the area, which would be over by Centerville and in through that region where those projects are taking place. We're going to end up with about a $9,500 balance in the account for that particular arm to use, which really isn't going to do any projects. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to get some more funding in order to do this. All of the counties that are a member of this group have paid their annual fee in order to be part of it. That's a $500 fee, which also pays for Scott Harwood at Pathfinders in order to do the work for that committee for us as secretary and filing grant paperwork and that kind of thing. And again, without any funding coming from the state of Iowa, that leaves that group kind of hanging out in the lurch as to whether there's a real need to have that any longer. So we're hoping that we can lobby again to the legislature when they reconvene coming up after the first of the year in order to get some money to do these types of projects. And barring not receiving that, we would look at whether there's a future for the program or not.
That's been under discussion for quite a while, I think.
Well, there's several drainage development areas around here,
Mhm.
Commissary Creek, and there's one down there in the south east corner, but they're related to the center. Is there any chance of at least this group seeing what all of those different areas are and seeing if they can get some funding for that?
Well, that's kind of what they're working on right now. But it's based off of if we've had any projects that could be developed out there, not just looking at putting money into the watershed as a whole. Identifying specific projects that can be done with the money that would be appropriated is where they would want to focus their attention on, I think, rather than just blanket saying, well, the Skunk River area here needs $100,000 in order to maybe do an improvement here or there or whatever location. You need to be a little bit more specific now these days when you're going to approach the legislature with trying to appropriate funds. And again, there wasn't much interest in appropriation coming from them this last time around because of the problems that we've been having financially because of COVID. But even prior to that, the lack of the desire for one particular legislator or another wanting to take up this as a way of improving these waterways. We had a champion in John Whitaker when he was our representative down here, who was in the initial phases of trying to start and form groups that would do this across the state. That was taken over by another legislator who retired here recently from his position, and none of the newer legislators that have come on board really want to get involved with it for whatever reason, or they don't really have a knowledge of what's going on with
Some
it.
of that funding has been going through items.
Right.
So there's a lot of funding that's going through a lot of different organizations. that
Right,
used
right.
to not exist when they got their money.
Right. So those were the committees that I met with this week, and we're continuing to move ahead at this point in time, but they only meet every quarter, so the SID committee won't be, the next one won't be until December. The next Southern Iowa Detention Center meeting won't be until December, and then the Southern Iowa Crime Commission meets at the same time as that meeting. They only meet every 6 months, so that would be our 6-month meeting with them. So that's all I have with that. We'll move on to public comments. We had quite a few public comments earlier with what was going on with our Amish discussion. Is there anything else? Because we just have ourselves. Was there any comments from people that are online with us? We just now have Pat Mac, Van Mac, Mike Brown, and KMCD News that are listening in.
Pleasant Plain meeting and discussing the.
Yeah, that's city council meeting tonight. I was planning on going up to that and presenting what we have here.
Okay.
As far as what the county wants to see with it. And I'll need some more copies of these particular documents to be able to take with us. We don't have a color copier in our office here, but I can. You have one that's 11 by 17, and I can come by and pick them up so that I got them. Those show the existing locations, and then the proposed locations is what they are.
How many do you want?
Well, why don't you give me 7 of them besides that one, 8 total,
All right.
including that one. So we have enough at least, or prepared enough at least, to give to each one of the council members and express what our desire is with that on the outside edge of town. Some of the arguments that they presented in the past, or when we recently had that meeting with the mayor here, were that nobody wants to slow down coming through town that way until they get to the other stop sign, and that's going to have a problem. But if you go up there and you turn off of Pleasant Plain Road and you're going west through town, there's no restriction on somebody just hammering it down because they see the county out in front of them and they're going to go. So that argument doesn't wash much with me, and that's what I'm going to try to express to them, that yes, you're trying to control the traffic as they're coming in. There's a better way to do that, but you're not doing the same thing with people that are coming the opposite direction through your community. And so, you know, we need to understand that it works both directions out there. And we are willing to work with them as far as us putting out the signage and relocating doing an ordinance or a resolution that says that we are going to do this and where those locations are at. And I believe what Scott's got proposed there is a very good solution, that we are actually moving more signage out a little bit farther away from the community that gives a more defined advanced warning that you're going to be slowing down. So that's what I want to express at that meeting tonight. It's at 7 o'clock at the community center in Pleasant Plain. So I will be there.
I just wanted to, while Pat and Mike are still on board, just to express my appreciation. All the work that they do on my behalf and for putting up with me. Thanks, guys.
All right. We'll now move on to allow claims and approve reports. I have a motion from Dimmitt, a second from Sandquist. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries to allow the claims and approve reports. We went through a pretty thorough discussion of nuisance properties, so I don't think we have anything more to discuss there. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Dimmitt, a second from Sandquist. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for being on, everyone.